It's interesting that Jesus always conjoins those two expressions. There is weeping and there is gnashing of teeth. And so this is a realm of punishment. This is a realm of anguish. This is a realm, as far as I can tell, of conscious torment.
Dr. Gunn, you've spoken from biblical authority to the eternality of hell. Can you share a little bit more about experientially? What will the person that ends up in hell go through? What does the Bible teach about that?
Yeah. So if someone were to ask me, what is hell going to be like? I think my first answer would be, well, I really hope you never have to find out.
Amen.
Because it is not pleasant. Some of the experiential sort of descriptive phrases I've already sort of alluded to, but here are some of them that I see coming out time and time again in the Bible. Darkness is frequently used to describe the experience of hell. Jesus specifically says outer darkness, or the uttermost darkness. You could translate that in 3 passages. And the idea there seems to be that it's a darkness that is removed from the light of God's presence. I argue in my dissertation that's probably kind of the Old Testament background to that idea, that where God is, there is glorious light, and therefore to be away from his presence would be to be in uttermost darkness. Peter and Jude also use darkness imagery to describe this place of damnation or this place of perdition. Fire occurs in multiple passages all throughout the New Testament, that it is a fiery realm. Suffering is mentioned. Punishment is mentioned. Paul uses both of those expressions in 2 Thessalonians 1:9. And then when we get into the book of Revelation, there are descriptions of torment and restlessness. So probably chapter 14, verse 11 is the most explicit passage describing that. It says that the smoke of their torment, and the they there is those who worshipped the Antichrist, who received the mark of the beast, and therefore were consigned to hell. The smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. And then later in Revelation, we have again descriptions of hell being the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. So in a word, unpleasant, to say the least, right? This is a realm of punishment. This is a realm of anguish. This is a realm, as far as I can tell, of conscious torment. Now, there is a discussion that evangelical scholars within our circles have had, and they've gone back and forth on the question, how literal or physical are these descriptions meant to be versus could some of them be perhaps more metaphorical descriptions of hell? And that's actually a very tricky question to answer, because we are dealing with an otherworldly realm, right? We're dealing with something that is other than our experience here on earth. And so some would argue on that basis that maybe this is more metaphorical than like literal hell, literal physical darkness. Others would want to prefer to stick with kind of a literal understanding of that. My own inclination is to think that the experience of hell is really two-staged or two-phased. And I see that particularly in the book of Revelation when the great white throne judgment is described at the very end. Seems to me that what you have is an initial experience of hell that begins at the moment of death for the unbeliever. And that is what is sometimes called the intermediate state. That is the state between death and the end of all things. And during that period, you would be experiencing hell in a disembodied state. So as a soul or as a spirit. And my hunch is that during that phase of the experience of hell, these things may well be more metaphorical, because it's hard to imagine how a disembodied state would interact with literal fire or literal darkness. Not saying it's impossible, but it's just a hard thing to conceive of. But certainly once you get to the great white throne judgment at the end of Revelation, those who were experiencing hell during that intermediate state then kind of transition over to the second phase of judgment, which is referred to as the lake of fire. And it seems to me that at that point we are dealing with physical descriptions of this eternal place of perdition, because now we're dealing with resurrected individuals. They are rejoined with their bodies and then sent on to this sort of second stage of damnation. So I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too, I guess, on that particular question. But you will find theologians who differ on that. An important point to keep in mind is that those who take the more metaphorical understanding would not say that because these are metaphors, it's therefore less severe or softer or something like that. I have a quote here from René Pache, who kind of leaned toward that view. And he said, "It is nonetheless true that the biblical expressions, however metaphorical they may be, give the unmistakable glimpses of a hideous reality. If the fire, the gnawing worm, the darkness, if these things are more spiritual than material, they imply all the more the concept of bitter suffering, remorse, misery, groping in darkness, and separation from God." So wherever you land on that particular question, we're dealing with a very harsh reality indeed.
Yeah, certainly are a hideous reality. I mean, that's picturesque, and it is difficult even to talk about it because I believe it is real, and people are going there. So I hesitate to ask, but I want to ask about weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Sure. Sure.
Do you believe weeping and gnashing of teeth is, are they weeping and gnashing because they're angry or because of the pain, or
Right.
why are they weeping and gnashing teeth?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I spent quite a bit of time in my dissertation examining that expression. It's interesting that Jesus always conjoins those two expressions. There is weeping and there is gnashing of teeth. And so I argued that what you have there is a single experience that contains two dimensions or two different parts to it. The term for weeping that Jesus uses there is a fairly common term. It means to cry, to weep, to wail. It is typically used to describe moments of intense emotion. It's oftentimes used when there is tremendous loss, and it can convey something like anguish or regret. I think probably anguish is more the idea there in the weeping and gnashing passages. But that second part there is gnashing of teeth. And I went back and looked at all the occurrences of that idiom in the Old Testament, in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, as well as in Jewish literature from the time. And what I found was that in the overwhelming majority of cases, the thing that gnashing of teeth communicates is actually rage. It is furious anger. And usually a furious anger that is accompanied with something like murderous intent. And so the closest New Testament example of this actually comes in the book of Acts, when Stephen is preaching against the Jewish religious leaders. He is presenting them with this basically a gospel presentation. He's proving that Jesus is the Messiah and that they've rejected their Messiah. And they find that they can't really answer any of his arguments, and they become so furious with him that they stone him to death. And the text says that they gnashed their teeth at him. Seems to be the same kind of an idea. In fact, it's a form of the same word there. And so what I argue is going on there with weeping and gnashing, the weeping conveys this idea of anguish and deep sorrow, but the gnashing conveys a very deep, rage-filled anger, which invites the question, who are they angry with? And since all of these occur in the context of eschatological judgment passages, the most natural way to take that is that they are angry at God. They are expressing rage toward him because he has consigned them to this place. There are commentators who would take that a little bit differently. Some of them prefer to emphasize the one aspect over the other. Seems to me the fact that Jesus uses both of them means that we should consider both of those dimensions. And so I think that's what we have described there.